Hello, welcome back to another video. As you can see, I'm not recording from my hotel room anymore in Amsterdam. I participated there for the Amsterdam Chess Open, and so far we have seen two games, two recaps, and so far 2 out of 2. What happened in round 3? Before I talk about the game, let me give you some background information because as I told you before, this tournament is a double round weekend tournament, and it was so hectic, and because of that, I was not able to continue recording recaps. Day 2, which is when round 3 and 4 happened, was so difficult for me because during the game, so we were, as the streamers, we were sitting next to a window, and that window was massive, and that day was the day that the sun decided to shine, and yeah, it was very unpleasant to deal with the sun. It was very difficult to play the game because the funny thing is that the day before I was freezing. The playing hall is pretty cold, which is good when you're playing chess. It's good to be in a cold atmosphere. But I was not really well dressed for that. So the next I thought I'm putting on a hoodie. I'm gonna put on a hoodie and make sure that I'm warm during my game so I don't shake because of that. Well, I showed up with my hoodie and little did I know that I would be burning alive for the next 3-4 hours in the sun. It was so warm, it was so hot, and I cannot do anything. There's nothing that I can do to help myself. The best I can do is cover my eyes against the sun, but that did not help with dealing with the heat, which is crazy because it's like freezing around here almost. But yeah, in the sun it was really uncomfortable, and because of this, my head was hurting the rest of the day, and because of that, I decided that I will record the recaps after the tournament. So the tournament's already ended. I know what happened. I know everything that happened, obviously, but let's talk about what happened in round 3. So in round 3, I faced Tim Grutter, who is a FIDE master rated 2350. I believe someone told me that he already has 3 IM norms, so I guess he just needs to hit 2400 FIDE and he's an international master. So a really talented player, and I knew that this was going to be a tough fight. But in the first 2 rounds, I saw his games and I saw that he was a little bit worse. Well, not just a little bit. In the first game, he was completely losing. The second game, it was a complete draw, but the opponent blundered very late in the end game, and that's why he won these 2 games. So he didn't deserve to win those games. So I thought, okay, he seems to be a little bit rusty right now, so maybe I have a chance because he was playing low-rated players as well. So I thought, okay, I have a good chance, right? So anyway, I was playing with the white pieces, and I started with e4, e5. Let me turn this off real quick. So I expected my opponent to play the Sicilian. I did briefly prepare for e4, e5, but yeah, there's only so much I could prepare, so little time. The rounds were starting early, but also I believe we got the pairings 8 a.m. in the morning, something like this. I think there were some technical difficulties, so I was okay with that, but it was pretty funny that the pairings were delayed this much. But okay, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, we're in the relapes, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, d3, d6, the usual. This is how I usually play, and I conveniently checked this variation briefly with my coach, not specifically here, but before the tournament we have been like looking at my repertoire and everything, and he was asking me, you know, what do you do here, and we briefly checked these lines. So I had more or less an idea what I was doing here. c3, g6, so the bishop is developing to g7 instead of e7, which makes a lot of sense because now it's becoming really difficult for white to attack on the king side. So short castle, bishop g7, knight bd2, short castle, rook e1, and h6. So I believe that h6 I was a bit surprised by because I don't remember this move at all. I believe the main moves are something like bishop d7, and b5 is also a common move, but that is a move that he played later. I just went with my plan with knight f1, b5, bishop c2. So the question here is always, do you go bishop b3 and try to bait your opponent into playing knight a5, because after bishop c2 the knight is oddly placed? It's always difficult to estimate which move is better, but I thought, okay, let's not overthink this and just play bishop c2. So here my opponent went for a5, and I thought, okay, there's something I should do is stop that pawn from marching forward, so I play a4, but that comes with the downside that I allow b4. So here I continue with knight e3, bishop b7, and here I want to make sure that my opponent does not play the move d5, because as soon as black plays the move d5, the position opens up and my pieces are a little bit cramped, whereas my opponent's pieces, this bishop is waiting for that diagonal to open, right? So I'm doing everything I can to stop d5. However, I'm not so sure if I want to play c4 for that reason. I don't think it's worth to play c4, so that's why I don't really want to play. And I thought originally, maybe I should be considering to play c4 at some point, but there's like so many little things in the Ruy Lopez. You can play so many small different lines. They have the smallest differences, but they can make a big difference in the game, right? So that's something for me to look into. But anyway, after some calculation, I thought I can play the move h3. And the reason why is because after d5, I was surprised that my opponent actually played this move, because after e takes d5, knight takes d5, knight g4. This pawn is under attack, and also the pawn h6 also under attack. So I have a double attack going on here. Admittedly, I did forget about the fact that my pawn on c3 is hanging. So initially when my opponent played d5, I was a little shocked that this pawn on c3 ends up hanging in this line. But then I double-checked everything and then realized, okay, I'm not going to lose a pawn, but it's getting really complicated. So yeah, the computer prefers me to play bishop d2 or knight g4 right away. It's really difficult to not take on d5, because if you allow your opponent already to play d5 and then also admit that, okay, I cannot really fight against this move, and then you allow, let's say, d4 or d takes c4, it doesn't really feel right. But apparently it's okay to keep that pawn there and just continue developing, continue attacking with knight g4. So yeah, that's very interesting. But I just took on d5, knight takes d5, and now knight g4. So the pawns are hanging. My opponent decides to play h5. It was possible for my opponent to play b takes c3, but here I was planning to... I was not entirely sure what I was going to do, but I was looking at this line with knight takes h6, king h8, and no, actually, king h8, it doesn't really do much, right? I don't have to be scared of that. The question is what happens after bishop takes h6, because bishop takes h6, and there's c takes b2, and if I move my rook, there is knight c3 threat, so I have to stop that, and then we're kind of in the equal position. It's a bit messy, but I think I should be fine here. So anyway, knight g4. My opponent played move h5. So now my knight is under attack. What do? I obviously take on e5. I just want to take that pawn, but it's getting a little bit dangerous because now this bishop is opened up. It's a bit scary, especially because there's knight takes c5, knight takes c5, b takes c3, and I cannot take back. If I take back, I am going to run into issues with knight takes c3, queen d4 is incoming, the knight is under attack, the rook is very vulnerable on a1, lots of tactics in the position. So I knew that I cannot afford this, and that's why I'm going to leave that pawn there. If my opponent wants to take on b2, be my guest, because I will take on b2. So that's when I thought, okay, let's just strengthen the position in the center. Not much of the center is left, but, you know, I tried to hold on to what I have here still. I played d4. And here, my opponent went for c takes b2, bishop takes b2, knight b4, bishop e4, and I was feeling pretty happy. Okay, not so happy because I don't really have much going on here anymore, but I do have an okay position. I'm not losing as far as I can tell. It's okay. It's, you know, it's going to be difficult to get a draw here because my opponent's obviously going to try everything he can to complicate matters. And I feel like black is the one really pressing here, but at the same time I thought, you know, it feels also very dry, the position. So let's see what happens. Bishop takes e4, rook takes e4, queen d5, and here I went for queen f3. It's a bit difficult to decide what move to go for here because there's queen e2, There's also rook e3, but all these c5 pushes felt really scary for some reason, and I thought with queen f3, at least I'm applying pressure on the pawn on f7, so that can come in handy perhaps. So rook f e8, rook f4, and yeah, it looks very shaky. My opponent trades the queens off the board, rook takes f3, and now c5. And yeah, I feel like I did not play very accurately here, because if I allow my opponent to play c5 this easily, surely something went wrong, right? Well, I went for knight takes f7, rook e2. I was really not happy about this move because I didn't expect this, and I felt like this made matters even more difficult for me. But okay, I still have some moves. Rook b1, a bit of an awkward move, but I have to do something. I cannot really move my bishop to a safe square. C takes d4, king f1, rook c2, knight g5. Here it's very difficult to play because my opponent has this crazy strong passed pawn on the d file. And what do I have? Yeah, not much really. The only thing I'm really hoping for is somehow to play knight e6 or maybe knight e4 and defend or somehow find some counterplay. I don't know where to find it, but we'll never know. We never know, right? Rook e8 is what my opponent played, and here I thought I have to start getting creative here because this rook is just coming in, d3, d2, and then yeah, lights out at some point. Well, apparently it was still fine for me. I could have played the move bishop a3 apparently to, sorry about that, to attack the knight on b4, and somehow it is fine. You have to play some crazy moves with white to survive. But instead of bishop a3, I went for the move rook f7, which turns out to not be a great move. I'm in a worse position now, but practically speaking, this move is amazing. And you know why? Because there is a million threads all of a sudden in the position. So the idea is that I'm willing to sacrifice my rook. So I'm going to sacrifice the exchange to grab the pawn on d4 and try to hold. So if my opponent goes crazy, like obviously the d pawn is pinned now, so d3 is not possible. The bishop is hanging, and if my opponent plays, let's say, rook d8, then there's rook takes g7, and there's a fork in the air. So my opponent is really restricted here, actually. It's really difficult to find a good move here with black. Apparently, you can simply still play the move rook e2, but I guess my opponent really didn't like that I could capture this and win the pawn on d4, and this way I could perhaps hold. So instead, my opponent went for the move bishop to h6, and I was really happy about this because this was exactly my plan. This was exactly my plan because now I have rook f6. I have the rook f6, and my opponent cannot take because then rook takes g6, and I win the bishop back, and I'm up a pawn. And I don't know if I'm in a winning position. Maybe, but this d pawn is still scary. But there's so many pawns dropping, so I should definitely be able to survive here, if not winning. So rook f6. I was so happy, and I could also see on my opponent's face that he did not expect this move at all. So I was feeling really confident, despite being very low on the clock already. So yeah, that's another thing. I was pretty low on the clock. Unfortunately, my opponent has a nice resource here, because you have to realize that king g7, I was checking moves such as bishop takes d4 and trying to make a discovery attack work, but there is no discovery attack. There's just bishop takes g5, and that's it. I don't have a good check here. So I was going to force the repetition with rook f7. Obviously, if king h8, you lose the piece with rook h7. So king g8, rook f6, and I was okay with the draw. But my opponent obviously was not okay with that, and he went for the move rook c6. And I did not see this move at all. It was not on my radar. So when he played it, I was a little bit frustrated that, oh, there is a move that defends everything. No, because I was so busy calculating king g7, bishop takes d4. And all of a sudden he plays rook c6. But okay, it's fine. We just take, knight takes c6. And here I have to play the move bishop c1 because my knight is hanging. I guess I could play h4 to defend, but I don't really want to play that. Because there's like rook b8 pinning the bishop. It's a little bit awkward. So bishop c1, knight e5, and now rook b6. I want to proceed the attack with my rook on the 6th rank because I already had my rook there, the other rook. So I thought that I need to have my other rook there as well because it's like so dangerous there. But apparently here, knight e4 was a better move to prepare some sort of knight f6 check. It's pretty tricky. My opponent has to play bishop g7 and the game on. It's in my control now. It's a little scary, knight c4 and d3, but I can keep my knight on e4, which means that this pawn is not ever going to d2, and it's much easier to defend this. Maybe not with the amount of time I had on the clock, which was very little, like 30 seconds, but it should be much easier to defend this. But anyway, rook b6, rook c8, bishop f4, and here my opponent took on g5. And me, being the stubborn person that I am, I took on e5, which was maybe not the right decision. So I thought that this is amazing, like that knight is such a pain, I need to get rid of it. Turns out that bishop takes g5 is a stronger move here. Now in hindsight it makes a lot of sense, but during the game it's hard to understand why my bishop is stronger when we're looking at this pawn on d4 here, and the knight supporting it so well. I thought that I had a big problem here, but his bishop is actually defending everything really well. c1 is covered, d2 is covered, and the king is also close to the pawn. So it does make quite some sense that white is in a pretty good position here, but for some reason during the game, also with little time on the clock, I could not evaluate it accurately. So anyway, bishop takes e5 is what I played, and after d3, rook b8. First of all, when I played rook b8, I thought maybe f4 is the winning move to like block the bishop and then trade rooks, because now my king is able to go to e1 and d2 and maybe pick up the pawn. But none of that is true because rook c1 check and d2 and the black just promotes. So during the game, I was a little bit frustrated there that maybe I missed an opportunity. But after rook b8, rook takes b8, bishop takes b8, I saw bishop d2, which was played. But for some reason, I thought, maybe I can win here because I can create an outside pass pawn on the king side. I can make something happen. But within a few minutes, I started to realize that maybe I'm on the verge or edge, or I don't know what the word is, but I'm very close to losing this because this king is moving very fast. That king looks like it's so far away. Like my king right here defending everything. That king is like on the other side of the world. So I don't have to be afraid of that. Well, I should have been. So I play f4, king f7, king f2, king e6. Here I go, king f3, because I want to play king e4. Well, as you can see, that was a terrible move because it was necessary to start creating the passed pawn right this second with the move g4. And the way to draw this position is actually insane. Like, it's really difficult, but in hindsight, now that I see it, it makes sense. So let me show you. So after h6, g4, a takes g4, king d5, g5 is the only move that draws because you are preparing to move f5, and after that g6, g7, the idea is that you sacrifice your g-pawn, and because of that, you're able to pick up the a-pawn with your bishop, and not like that, like this. And then d3 cannot really move forward because you're blocking it very easily, and the other pawn is also useless, and you also have a passed pawn. So basically, it's a very balanced position, that endgame. So here, if king e4, bishop c7, and if black takes here, I take here, and same position as I just talked about, it's fine. This is like easy to draw. But what about king c4? Because that is the idea, right? My opponent wants to pick up that a4 pawn and then start pushing both pawns because I cannot defend the a-pawn at all. Well, now I can play move f5. And after g takes f5, g6, and my pawn is promoting, right? So my opponent has to stop it. How? Well, I guess bishop c3 is a move, but now I have the move bishop c7. The pawn on a5 is under attack. I'm threatening to push, and my opponent cannot play d2 because king e2. And if my opponent plays, let's say, king b3, then I just take on a5, and my opponent is not in time to capture that pawn on a4. So because of that, so let's say d2, g7, and we will be promoting at the same time, and I promote with check, but I can also, black can also just take on g7 and take on d2, and this is an easy draw. So, crazy position, crazy endgame, and it's so insane to me how one move just makes a difference here. One move. And yeah, it made me realize how difficult bishop endgames can be, because this is not so easy to understand, especially in time travel. But okay, I went for king f3, and after this, I was simply losing because my opponent is in time. King d5, g4, takes, king c4. I did consider move g5 here, but it's already too late because my opponent is already going to tuck tuck take that pawn on a4 and it's over. So yeah, I see the ideas, but I didn't have the right execution, and I could not believe that I was actually going to lose this game, right? So g4 takes, king c4, f5, g takes, king b3. We just played a few more moves, and after king c2, I decided that it's enough. My opponent's about to promote, and it's over. I don't have anything left. I missed one tempo here. One tempo. If my pawn was on f7, I could have just taken the pawn on d2, and it's a draw. Yeah. Chess is harsh, chess is tough, but I learned a lot from this game. It was such a fun and stressful game, especially because of the sun. And also, like, I was spending half of my time because of the sun, like for no reason at all. I was standing up from my board like every single move because I could not stand sitting there for hours in the sun. And a few meters away, it was already much more comfortable, like much cooler. So that was my way to deal with this. But yeah, maybe that caused some less performance in this game. But overall, I'm really happy about this game. Tough loss, but a very interesting game and a lot to take away from this game. So yeah, yeah, that was round 3. It was a fun game. And I can tell you that the next couple of games, like all of the games, were crazy. So make sure to stay tuned for round 4 in the next video. I hope to see you there. Thanks for watching.